At the end of the Minuteman line of quests, when you go to defend the castle, Roddy Shaw greets you and then says something kinda strange.
Glad you made it in time, General. I guess we're about to find out if these new Minutemen really have what it takes. We've seen a lot of those Institute Crow things sniffing around. Looks like they're getting ready to try to take us out.
Institute Crow things? What does she mean by Institute Crow things? Well, the next hint we get is from Justin Io himself. When you attend the Directorate meeting, Justin Io, who's in charge of the Synth Retention Bureau, gives the Directorate an update.
The level of unrest in the Commonwealth continues to rise, as we're all aware. Your report.
Yes, Watchers show no additional threats beyond those previously identified.
Watchers. Justin Io refers to something called Watchers. One of the only other places we find this term used is in the book called The Art of Fallout 4. In that book, we find a page on flying creatures, birds and bats. One of them is named Watcher Sparrow. Another one is named Watcher Crow. Could it be that the Institute has created synth birds that they are using as eyes and ears around the Commonwealth? We already know that they make synth animals. We find synth Brahmin and, of course, synth gorillas. But our next clue comes when we explore the Synth Retention Bureau in the Institute. In the room on the left-hand side, we find what looks like a situation room of sorts. On the wall, we find a slew of monitor banks. Each monitor is observing a different scene in the Commonwealth. What's most interesting about these images is that they all appear to be taken from a bird's eye view. None of them are on the ground. Some of them are at odd pitches. In the middle of the room, we find a map of the Commonwealth, and directly above it, we find even more of these terminals. I think this room makes it clear that the Institute is not only monitoring the Commonwealth, but is likely using watchers, or synth birds, to do so. But what exactly are they watching? I wanted to figure out what each of these scenes on these terminals could possibly be. I cracked open the creation kit, but had a hard time finding this monitor bank in the game. I wanted to extract the images so that I could inspect them more closely. Thankfully, Eleonora came to the rescue and extracted them for me. With the images in hand, we can now give them some proper attention. The first one we're going to look at is what I think is probably the easiest. In this image, we see a traffic cone on the ground next to a large semicircle and a Vault-Tec guard station in the distance. Well, this is very clearly the entrance to Vault 111. The Institute was watching when you emerged from Vault 111. What's even more coincidental is that this image was taken at just the right angle to be in line of sight of a popular perch for crows. Nearby is a tree filled with crows. They're not moving right now because I used console commands to freeze the frame so that we could explore the crows before they flew away. But crows really like to perch on this one tree, and it just so happens to be at exactly the right spot for that one monitor bank. The monitors have 3 other scenes from Vault 111. One is just woods, which is impossible to match up, but the other 2 we can match up fairly easily. One has a traffic cone lying on its side next to 2 wooden crates with a piece of machinery in the distance. This matches up to exactly what we find just outside Vault 111. And the next is actually pointed right at Sanctuary. We find a sanctuary building off in the distance and 2 prominent trees in the foreground. We can easily find these in the game by looking out towards Sanctuary from the hillside where we find Vault 111. The next location under surveillance is the Museum of Freedom in Concord. Here we can clearly see the front door to the Museum of Freedom with a stoplight on the corner and a banner across the street. Everything matches up to what we see in the game, and this location happens to be right on top of some electrical wires, which is likely a place where birds would be hanging out. The Institute is monitoring 2 more locations in Concord. In the next one, we see a pipe snaking up the side of a building and then on top of it. We also see a power conduit to the left, and to the right we can see a triangular roof off in the distance with some trees in the background. This is the building right next to the Museum of Freedom. There's the exact same pipe snaking up and going on top of the roof. There's the power conduit, and we see the same building off in the distance. The last one in Concord is an exterior fire escape just outside the Museum of Freedom. We see a telephone pole in the street, a banner at the very bottom, and if you look closely, you can see a triangular shadow of the nearby church on the ground. I had to fiddle with time of day before I got the shadow right, but this image in the Institute was taken at exactly 1:00 p.m. That's the only way we could get the shadow from the steeple of the church to align exactly to where it was in the image. As you can see, we have the telephone pole, the fire escape, and the banner. So from this, we learned that the Institute was monitoring Preston Garvey and the Minutemen even before you met them. The next location that the Institute was monitoring is, of course, Diamond City. Now, this image is really dark. It must have been taken at night. It's kind of hard to make out, but if you look closely, you can see a street lamp with a circular top next to a sign that says Mayor, and next to what appears to be a painted sign on a roof that has the word chapel in it. This must be in Diamond City. And sure enough, just outside the entrance, we find the lamppost with the circular head, the mayor sign, and on the roof, painted in white, All Faiths Chapel. And what happens if we back up just a little bit? This scene is right in line of sight of a power line where crows like to sit. You will find crows all over Diamond City. They hang out on top of the All Faiths Chapel and on these power lines just outside the entrance. Many of these are Institute Synth spies. The next Diamond City location is a broader shot of the city. In the foreground, we see a spherical air vent right next to a tall, cylindrical exhaust. In the midground, we can see the baseball bat sign to Moe's shop, and in the far background, we can see a water tower. If we line it up just right, we can see all of those same things. The vent and the exhaust in the foreground, Moe's bat in the middle, and the big red water tower off in the distance. The final one is strange. It looks like a Brahmin. Well, Brahmin are found anywhere. This could have been taken anywhere. But no, directly beneath the Brahmin is again the sign to the All Faiths Chapel. That must mean that this is in Diamond City, and if it's in Diamond City, then it's not a Brahmin, it's actually the sign to Choice Chops, the meat vendor in Diamond City.
Is the Institute spying on your home? Read the public to find out.
Yes, Nat. The answer is yes. The next one is easy to guess for those of you who are really into your settlements. We find a pipe in the foreground next to a rusting fence and then a farm with a bunch of potato plants. But this farm is on the shore. We see water consuming the top third of the picture with a cement barricade at the edge of the land. This is none other than the Warwick Homestead. We see the cement barricade separating the land from the water in the distance. The farm is right there next to a rusting fence, and in the foreground, we see the pipe. The interesting thing about this is that there are no crows at the Warwick Homestead. Instead, we find radgulls. Did the Institute make synths of radgulls? Well, they must have. We know from the art of Fallout 4 that they made synth watchers out of sparrows, not just crows. If they could make synth watchers out of sparrows, they could certainly do it out of radgulls. The Institute is monitoring two more places here at the Warwick Homestead. The first is the very unique iron catwalk entryway just outside the main building. The bird is perched on top of the building, looking east out to sea. And in the next one, it almost looks like a clean, plain field, but it is the Warwick Homestead. You can see the ocean at the top of the screen. There's a fence next to the barricade, and then there are three unique concrete pieces at the edge of the scene. This corresponds to the point of land where the Institute is conducting their crop experiment. See the fence and see those three unique slabs of concrete. Notice the large orange pumpkin? This is the result of the Institute's crop experiment if you complete the related quest. It's no coincidence that the Institute has a synth bird camera pointed directly at this spot. It's their experiment. They want to monitor it. Now these next ones were really tricky for me to find. In this image we see a tall concrete wall with a small fence and a bent pole in the middle. Maybe it's a park, maybe it's a tree. And then off in the distance I can't tell if that's water or a road. Is that the sea or is it just a blasted out road? Well, it can't be a tree, there are no branches, so it must be a flagpole. As soon as I thought flagpole, I thought it must be a military base of some sort. Which military base is the Institute most likely to monitor? Why, none other than Fort Hagen. There are a few differences, but everything matches up. We see the flagpole in the middle of this little relaxation area, 4 park benches against a fence, just as we saw in the other image, and it's right next to the exact same road. The differences are in minor decorations. The Fort Hagen in the game now has these red, white, and blue banners on the wall. The one in the image didn't have them. It also has some shrubbery growing over one of the barricades, but in the image, there are no plants. It's no wonder why the Institute would be monitoring Fort Hagen. This is where they sent Kellogg to wait for you. The next one is a concrete building next to what looks like a military bunker. I again thought of a military base of some sort, and this actually was at Fort Hagen as well, really close. We see the same military bunker next to the concrete building, and there's a rusted out car with its nose hanging out of the garage, just like in the image. The only major difference is that the red and white barricade is gone and there's no art on any of the walls. In the version in the game, we find the barricade, a bulletin board, and some posters on the red walls. That is all of them save one. Now there was one that I just couldn't find. I probably spent 3 hours flying around the world of Fallout 4 trying to find it, and I couldn't find it. This is it. In the foreground we've got a concrete building with a rounded corner on the roof. Directly below it is a concrete barrier wall, and it's rather unique. You can't see through it. It looks like it's a solid concrete piece. Beyond that are 2 buildings. One has a rather unique roof. This is typical of some of the older buildings in Boston, but the one directly to the left of it doesn't have that unique roof. It almost makes me think like these are shopping buildings or offices. And then in the far back, we see a forest. So we know immediately that this can't be in downtown Boston because we can see a forest in the background. I went all over. I went to Salem, Medford, Concord, Lexington, Cambridge, trying to find any buildings that matched this scene. I thought it might be in the Fort Hagen area, since typically Bethesda will have 3 of these in important areas. We found 3 or 4 in the Vault 111 Sanctuary area, 3 at Concord, 3 at Warwick, but only 2 at Fort Hagen. But I couldn't find this exact scene anywhere at Fort Hagen. The closest I got was when I went to the Cambridge area. There we find many buildings that are concrete, and a few of them have the same unique roof that was in this image. I thought it might be at the Cambridge police station because after all that's where the Brotherhood of Steel is, and it makes sense that the Institute would monitor it. Now I did find some concrete walls that kind of matched the ones in the image. They're slightly different. The concrete walls at the Cambridge police station have the same concrete pillars, but the walls between the pillars are made of a stacked stone, not solid cement like the ones we find in the image. So it was close but no cigar. Also, many of the buildings in this area are completely blasted out, and none of the buildings in the image are blasted out. They're whole. So ultimately, after spending many hours looking for this one, I just couldn't find it and I gave up. But I'm sure that you guys will solve this one for me in no time at all. If you happen to know where this scene is, let me know in the comment section below. I'll verify your findings and then update this video in the comments with the solution. Again, we're looking for a building in the foreground with a rounded corner roof, a complete cement barricade wall with a flat face, a road before 2 buildings in the background, one of which has a rather ornate and older looking roof with windows in it. What surprised me about these findings is we didn't find the Institute surveilling the Brotherhood of Steel or the Railroad. They're watching you, they're watching the Minutemen, they're watching their own experiments, and they're watching your confrontation with Kellogg. but they're not watching their two biggest enemies, the Railroad and the Brotherhood of Steel. That, to me, is really interesting. They know where the Brotherhood of Steel is. It's not like the Brotherhood is keeping it secret, and they destroyed the Railroad's former headquarters at the switchboard. You'd think one of these scenes would be outside a Slocum's Joe in Lexington, but I looked, and there's no match to this one scene. So, I'm not sure why the Institute would omit those two threats. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Not only did the Institute create synth humans, synth gorillas, and synth Brahmin, but they created synth birds to use as flying video cameras to spy on the people of the Commonwealth. It's easy to say that your everyday settler or Diamond City resident is just paranoid and bigoted, that they simply fear what they do not understand. But then you see something like this and you realize they're right to be afraid. They really are being watched. It's not paranoia if it's true. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the full story of the Institute Watchers in Fallout 4. What are your thoughts? Is this one more reason to hate the Institute? Or do you think it's a rather logical choice on the Institute's part, and you would do the same thing if you were in their shoes? Let me know in the comment section below. I publish a new video every single day of the week, so be sure to subscribe to see what I publish next. I don't know if you noticed, but I just recently published a line of Oxhorn shirts. That's right, you can now wear a cool Oxhorn t-shirt, either bedecked with some Fallout 4 quote or a magnificent beard. You can find a link to my shirt shop on Teespring in the description below. And if you like what I do and you want to support me in a more personal way, consider becoming one of my patrons on Patreon. Patreon subscribers gain access to a private channel on my Discord server, as well as a bunch of other cool Oxhorn perks. But more than anything, I'm just so glad that you're here watching this video with me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow morning, bright and early, with a brand new video.